wanted to check in and say hi. It's been a couple days since I've read to you, so I wanted to record our Chapter 5 of Secrets According to Humphrey. I'm really anxious to see what happens, as I'm sure you are as well. I'm actually sitting in my camper on the side of my house. I'm not camping, but I've set this up like an office so that I can record videos and get some work done. And as soon as I get it set up a little bit more and clean out some things, I'll give you a little tour of my new workspace. I think you guys will think it's pretty funny that I am sitting in my camper. But anyway, we're going to move on to Chapter 5. It's called Secret Greetings, Secret Meetings. Watch carefully, Og, I told my froggy friend when Phoebe brought me back to room 26 on Monday. You might see some strange things going on. Boing, Og replied, which I think meant he was going to watch. It wasn't long before Mrs. Brisbane opened the door to room 26 and the students started coming in. Watch what Phoebe does when Kelsey comes in, I squeaked to Og. Boing, boing, Og said. Hi, Humph. Slow down, Simon said as he raced past my cage in a hurry as always. When just Joey came in, he walked straight to my cage. Hi, Humphrey, he said. Did you have a good weekend? 'Cause guess what? I saw a great TV show last night about elephants. Boy, do I want to see elephants in the wild someday. I've never seen an elephant, but from what I've heard, they are much, much, much bigger than dogs or even camels. I don't think I'd care to see one anywhere, especially not in the wild. Boing! I don't think Og wanted to meet an elephant either. I looked at the door and saw Kelsey coming in. She headed for the cloakroom to take off her coat. Kelsey's here, Og. Be on the lookout, I said. Joey giggled when he heard our conversation. Of course, I like hamsters and frogs the best, he said. He's one unsqueakably smart boy. Just then, Og sounded the alarm. Boing, 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 boing. Kelsey was walking toward Phoebe. Thanks, now, watch, I told my neighbor. As I expected, Phoebe raised her right hand. Kelsey raised hers too. Then they wiggled their fingers and winked. Next, they giggled, which wasn't part of the secret signal. Boing! Og sounded surprised. What's this for? Rolling Rosie raised her fingers and wiggled them too. Oh, it's nothing, Phoebe answered. We were just waving. It was more than that. Come on, tell me, Rosie insisted. We can't, Kelsey said. It's a secret club. Can I be in it? Rosie asked. Kelsey and Phoebe didn't answer right away. Finally, Kelsey said, if we let everyone in, it wouldn't be a secret anymore. When Kelsey and Phoebe turned away, I could see how upset Rosie was. Boing, boing, Og said. I don't think he liked what he saw either. Og, it's a signal they planned at Phoebe's house, I explained. I glanced at Og, and I was positive that he wasn't smiling. Splash! He dived into the water side of his tank and began to swim. I wasn't smiling either. I hopped on my wheel and began to spin as fast as I could. The next morning, before class began, Stop Talking Sophie came over to my cage. She does love to talk. Hi, Humphrey. Did you have a good sleep last night? I'll bet it's boring in here when we're gone. I hope I get to take you home soon, she said. She talked so fast I couldn't even get a squeak in. Then, Rolling Rosie joined her. Sophie, would you like to start a secret club, she asked. Just you and me? Sophie's eyes lit up. Oh, yes, I'd love to. Let's talk about it at lunchtime, Rosie said. As she rolled her wheelchair away, Sophie turned back to me. Did you hear that? Isn't that great? Great, 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 I agreed. Sophie leaned in close to my cage. I still miss my old school and my best friend there, Annie. I keep asking my parents if we can move back. I didn't know that Sophie was new to Longfellow School or that she missed her best friend. But if I have a Rosie for a new best friend? Sophie didn't finish because the bell rang and class began. Mrs. Brisbane began the day with our hard vocabulary words. At least now I knew that papyrus was like paper and that hieroglyphics was a way to write. And I knew that pyramids were huge stone buildings and pharaohs were kings. That didn't make those words any easier to spell, though. Mrs. Brisbane gave my friends papers where they had to fill in the blanks with the right words. Then she said, Class, we're taking a little break from ancient Egypt. It's time to go to the library. If you have books to return, get them out now. My classmates took their library books and lined up. Thomas had the most books. Look, Mrs. Brisbane, he said, I finished all of these. I want to check out a mummy book, Simon said. Me too, Hurry Up Harry said, and I'm going to get there first. Usually Simon is 3 steps ahead of Harry, but this time Harry was right by his side. Mrs. Brisbane smiled, and soon Og and I were alone in the classroom again. As much as I like Og, I would rather have gone to the library with my friends. I'm too small to reach the tall shelves, but I like looking up at row after row of books. Tall books, small books, short books, long books, books with pictures, books without pictures. I only wished I could pick one out for myself. Every day Mrs. Brisbane read aloud to the class. That was my favorite time of the day, especially when it was an unsqueakably exciting story. When my friends came back, they were all clutching library books and chattering excitedly. I got a mummy book, Simon shouted as he rushed into the room. I got one too. Harry held up his book. So did I. Nicole waved her book under Mrs. Brisbane's nose. See, there's great pictures. Sometimes, not now, Nicole isn't very patient. I'll look at it later, Mrs. Brisbane told her. I never knew there were so many books about mummies. I got a book all about what it was like to live in ancient Egypt, Tall Paul said. Humphrey, I got a book about a hamster. Stop talking, Sophie said as she passed by my cage. Maybe I'll read it to you. Please do, I squeaked, and I meant it. All my friends seemed so excited about their books, except for one. Joey was the last to return to the classroom. He wasn't smiling or chattering, but he did have a small, thin book in his hand. What did you choose? Mrs. Brisbane asked him. Joey winked, wrinkled his nose, and looked down at the book. Just a book. What book? I squeaked at the top of my lungs. Unfortunately, my voice is not very loud. It's, a book about, a rabbit, he said softly. Mrs. Brisbane leaned down and looked at the book. Oh, yeah, she said, The New Adventures of Robot the Rabbit. Haven't you read this before? Joey stared at his shoes. Maybe I did. It was pretty good. It is good, Mrs. Brisbane said, but next time try a new book. There are so many great ones in the library. Joey didn't look up. Okay, he said. Mrs. Brisbane patted him on the shoulder, and Joey hurried back to his table. A robot that is also a rabbit? I squeaked. I didn't mind Joey reading a book about a rabbit or a robot, but I minded him looking so unhappy. I guess Mrs. Brisbane felt the same way. When my classmates were rushing out of room 26 for lunch, Mrs. Brisbane stopped Joey. Hey, can we talk alone for a minute, she asked. He nodded. Why don't you eat your lunch in here, she asked. Should I get you some milk? Joey shook his head. No, I have it in my lunchbox. Soon, Mrs. Brisbane and Joey were sitting at his table eating their sandwiches. It was always funny to see Mrs. Brisbane sitting in a student chair. She wasn't that tall for a human, and in a student chair she looked, well, almost like a student. I have tuna, Mrs. Brisbane said after taking a bite of her sandwich. How about you? Joey swallowed a bite of his sandwich. Cheese, he said. So, Joey, I wanted to ask you about your library books, she said. The Robot Rabbit books are good, but you've read them already. Why do you like to read them over and over? Joey took a bite out of his sandwich and spent a long time chewing it. Robot the Rabbit's funny, he finally said, and he has great adventures. Mrs. Brisbane pushed a pile of yummy-looking carrot sticks toward Joey. Have some, she said. I wouldn't have minded having a carrot myself. I guess loving carrots is something I have in common with rabbits, although probably not robots. Joey took one and nibbled. Did Mr. Fitch help you look for something new? She asked. Mr. Fitch was the school librarian, and he knew everything about books. Yes, Joey said. He showed me a lot of books. A pirate book, and a book about a soccer team, and a book about landing on the moon. Those sound good. Mrs. Brisbane crunched on her carrot. Joey didn't say anything. They ate in silence for a minute. If you tried something new, you could still read Robot the Rabbit books once in a while, Mrs. Brisbane said. Joey put his sandwich down. Maybe. I'm getting a little too old for them. Mrs. Brisbane nodded. I think you could try something at your reading level. What about a mummy book, like Simon and Harry and Nicole are reading? Joey shook his head. I guess he wasn't very interested in reading about mummies. I have to say, I don't want to read books about mummies either because they sound unsqueakably scary. Mrs. Brisbane wiped her mouth with her napkin. Joey, I'd like you to challenge yourself with your reading. Will you try? Joey stared down at his desk, but he nodded his head. Yes, he whispered. Great, Mrs. Brisbane said. The bell rang and Mrs. Brisbane stood up. I'm so glad we had this talk, aren't you? Joey nodded. I think just Joey is a very honest person, but at that moment, I'm not sure he was telling the truth. And then he spoke up. Mrs. Brisbane, maybe I'm just not very good at reading. Mrs. Brisbane looked surprised. Really? Your grades could be a little better, but they're not that bad. Joey shrugged again. I don't know, he said, but when I read a book, I never seem to get anywhere. Mrs. Brisbane looked at Joey for a while before she answered. We're going to work on that, she said. Together. Joey looked a little happier, but I have to squeak the truth. I felt bad, bad, bad. You won't tell anyone, will you, about my not liking to read? Joey asked. No, it's our little secret, Mrs. Brisbane answered. After school was over, I jiggled my lock that doesn't lock and scrambled over to Ogg's tank. I can't imagine not liking to read, I squeaked. As soon as I said it, I realized something. I can read, because I'm an unsqueakably smart hamster, but Og probably can't. Not because he's not smart, it's because he's a frog, and books don't hold up well in the water. I've got to find a book Joey likes, I said. Boing, boing, Og agreed. But I'd have to wait until later that night, after Aldo left. As soon as Aldo came into the room, he said, Guys, I really want to tell you something. My big secret. Tell us, I squeaked, please. I promised Maria I wouldn't tell anyone yet, he said, but I'm about to burst. Don't burst, I said. That sounds messy. In the end, though, Aldo didn't tell us his secret, and Mrs. Brisbane didn't tell me her secret about what student would be leaving. Not knowing someone's secret can make you feel terrible. I'd seen the look on Rosie's face when she saw Phoebe and Kelsey with their secret signal and heard about their club. And yet, I have my own secret, a secret mission. I had to find a book for Joey, and it couldn't be about Robot the Rabbit. All right, well, that's the end of Chapter 5. Still no information about who's leaving, just leaving us with another cliffhanger, which is good because that means that we want to keep reading to find out what's happening. So it sounds like there's a really good challenge in room 26 in Miss Brisbane's class, that she's asking one of her students to challenge himself to read a book that is his reading level and maybe pushing himself a little. So I'm challenging you, the Van Gogh class, to also push yourself a little this week and read something that you normally wouldn't, and just try. You have your parents, you have siblings, people that can help you, but you'll never know if you can do it unless you give it a try. And I believe in you guys, and I know that you can do it. And even if you can't right now, I know that if you practice, you will get there. So I want to leave you with that. I miss you, I miss you, I miss you, and I can't say that enough. I cannot wait to see you all. Be prepared for some super duper Miss Mackenzie hugs when I see you again, and I hope that you all have a lovely day. Bye, my friends.